All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a massive, deep dive into 400 years of relentless, ungovernable, and frankly, completely chaotic history. We are unpacking the entire history of New York City. I am so pumped to guide you through this because, as you're going to see, the story of this city, it isn't some neat, orderly progression. It's a wild, unpredictable ride, and we're going to break it down step by step. So, here's the big question. How exactly did a muddy little trading post survive fire, war, riots, bankruptcy, and terror to become the undisputed capital of the world? Honestly, it's a miracle it survived it all. It feels like every single generation, something apocalyptic came along and tried to finish this city off, but none of it worked. Today, we're going to figure out why and really hammer home our core theme. New York's absolute superpower is its unimaginable resilience through total chaos.
Section 1. The Island of Many Hills.
Let's wind the clock way back, long before the concrete jungle, the subway grates, and those soaring skyscrapers you're thinking of. This place was a quiet, densely forested island. It was completely surrounded by wetlands, rivers, and wildlife. For over 13,000 years, the Lenape people thrived in this lush ecosystem. They hunted, they fished, and they knew literally every single current in that harbor. But then, in 1609, Henry Hudson sails in for the Dutch East India Company looking for a shortcut to Asia. And man, within just a few decades, everything changes at breakneck speed, eventually culminating in the English taking control in 1664. The world the Lenape had known for millennia was suddenly and permanently flipped upside down.
You know the word Manhattan, right? Well, it actually comes from Mannahatta, a Lenape word that most likely translates to Island of Many Hills. And here's a really cool fact for you. Broadway, that huge, bustling artery that still cuts diagonally through Manhattan today, completely messing up the perfect street grid, that was originally an ancient Lenape trail. Their footprint is literally the foundation of the modern city we know today.
Section 2. Dutch Trade and English Conquest. Let's move into the era of the Dutch West India Company. This is where this little patch of wilderness really starts transforming from an unruly trading post into a structured colony. 60. That's the magic number. 60 guilders worth of axes, kettles, and drilling awls. That's what a Dutch director named Peter Minuit used in 1626 to formally purchase Manhattan. But get this, here's the crazy part. The tribe Minuit actually dealt with, they were based over in Brooklyn. The Lenape who actually lived on Manhattan hadn't agreed to a thing, so the Dutch effectively bought the island from people who didn't even own it. Plus, the indigenous people didn't even believe land could be permanently sold, just shared. So both sides walked away thinking they got a great deal, but obviously they understood the transaction in completely different ways.
Now, this shift in power brought some really drastic changes. Dutch New Amsterdam was incredibly chaotic, wonderfully unruly, and actually surprisingly diverse. One visiting priest noted 18 different languages being spoken in a town of just 500 people. But when the English arrived in 1664 with warships, and took the colony without firing a single shot, by the way, they completely transformed it into New York. They brought in rigid laws, and most significantly, they transformed slavery. Under the Dutch, slavery existed, but in this loosely regulated gray zone. The English, though, they codified it into harsh, permanent law. Children born to enslaved mothers were now enslaved for life. By 1703, a staggering 40% of New York households owned enslaved people. The city was building its massive prosperity on a very dark foundation.
Section 3. Revolution and the Grig. So, moving into the 18th and 19th centuries, we get a front row seat to the dramatic birth of the American nation. In 1776, revolutionary chaos absolutely hammered the city. George Washington's army was utterly crushed at the Battle of Long Island. Trapped with his back to the East River, Washington literally stood on a hill and said, "Good God, what brave fellows I must this day lose." But then this miraculous thing happens. Under the cover of total darkness and a dense, perfectly timed fog, Washington silently evacuated 9,000 men across the river. The British woke up the next morning to a completely empty camp. But despite that epic escape, New York still fell. Lower Manhattan was destroyed in the Great Fire, the British occupied the city for 7 grueling years, and a horrifying 11,000 Americans died, rotting away in British prison ships, anchored right there in the harbor. The toll on the city was just devastating.
So how do you rebuild a burnt, chaotic city? Well, you plan it. Enter the 1811 Commissioner's Plan. They hired this 20-year-old surveyor named John Randall Jr., and he spent years walking the entire length of Manhattan, mapping every single swamp, stream, and hill.
Then, the commissioners took his maps and literally just drew straight lines right over all of it. We're talking a strict, unforgiving grid of 155 streets and 12 avenues. They imposed this rigid logic directly over the wilderness. It wasn't a blueprint for the city that existed at the time, it was a blueprint for the massive metropolis they fully intended to build.
Section 4. Immigration, Industry, and Upheaval.
The 19th century kicked off a massive domino effect, and it all started with the Erie Canal in 1825. Imagine a 363-mile ditch connecting the Great Lakes directly to the Hudson River. The economic genius of this is just staggering. Shipping costs from the American interior dropped by 90% almost overnight. Suddenly, every bushel of wheat and barrel of flour from the Midwest flowed straight down the Hudson and right into New York Harbor. The city always had a great harbor, sure, but now it had the wealth of an entire continent backing it.
And the consequence of all that wealth flowing in? A massive, staggering population explosion. We're talking going from just 60,000 people in 1800 to 500,000 by 1850. The city literally quadrupled in a single generation. To put that in perspective, this boom was heavily driven by immigrants fleeing terrible hardship, the Irish escaping famine, Germans fleeing failed revolutions. By 1850, nearly half of all New Yorkers were foreign-born, packing into overcrowded, disease-ridden slums like the notorious Five Points. But as you can probably guess, this extreme, rapid growth brought incredible tension. $300. That was the fee introduced by the federal government during the Civil War in 1863 to just buy your way out of the military draft. For working-class immigrants who couldn't possibly afford that kind of money, the message was loud and clear: rich men stay home, poor men go die. This absolute fury sparked the deadly New York draft riots, which remains the worst urban violence in American history. It devolved into horrific racial violence against black New Yorkers, culminating in a mob tragically burning down the colored orphan asylum on Fifth Avenue. It's a really devastating reminder of the deep, deep fractures within this booming city.
The decades right following the Civil War, they were defined by extreme contrasts. On one hand, you had rampant, almost unbelievable political corruption. I mean, Boss Tweed famously stole up to $200 million from the city's coffers. You had horrific industrial tragedies, like the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, where 146 garment workers died simply because of locked doors and zero fire escapes. Yet at the exact same time, you had triumphant engineering marvels happening, like the completion of the Brooklyn Bridge in 1883, which carried 100,000 people a day. Tragedy and triumph happening simultaneously right on the exact same streets.
Section 5. The Modern Metropolis. As we roll into the 20th century, skyscrapers are piercing the clouds, subways are rumbling underground, and the city completely cements its status as a global powerhouse. 30,000. I love this number because it perfectly captures New York's rebellious spirit. During Prohibition in the 1920s, when the U.S. federally banned alcohol, New York essentially just said no thanks and ignored it. At the height of the ban, an estimated 30,000 illegal speakeasies were operating across the city. Think about that. They actually had more bars during the ban than before it. The city just took the federal mandate and threw it onto the pile of rules it had absolutely no intention of obeying. This whole modern era is just a dizzying roller coaster of incredible highs and devastating lows. In 1929, the Wall Street crash wiped out $14 billion in a matter of hours, plunging the city into the Great Depression. But watch what happens next. In 1930, right in the absolute darkest depths of that depression, Mohawk ironworkers are out there walking steel beams 1,000 feet in the air to build the Empire State Building in a record 410 days. Just incredible. Fast forward to the 1970s. The city is completely broke, the president famously tells New York to drop dead in 1975, and neighborhoods are literally burning. Yet right there, amidst the rubble of the abandoned South Bronx in 1973, an 18-year-old named DJ Kool Herc throws a party and invents hip-hop. Arguably the most influential music of the entire 20th century, born from the lowest of lows. So, think about everything we've just explored together today. From the devastating fires of the Revolution, to the draft riots, to bankruptcy, and the unthinkable tragedy of September 11th. Chaos isn't a threat to the city. Chaos is the very fuel of its resilience. Every single time it gets knocked down, it reinvents itself stronger than before. Which really leaves us with a fascinating question to ponder. Does New York survive in spite of its chaos, or does it survive because of it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And the next time you walk the streets of New York, what history will you see?